From the Vegas Golden Knights, this is SLGND, presented by Allegiant. I'm Justin Russo. Husband, father, mentor, and of course, coach. All words that apply to Golden Knights head coach, Bruce Cassidy. As the team enters the playoff push, Bruce catches up with the guys on SLGND to talk about the final portion of the season, how he balances his many roles both on and off the ice, and some of the books, shows, and music he's been consuming in his spare time. The guys then review the conversation with Bruce and take a look ahead at what the VGK need to do to set themselves up for another Stanley Cup championship run. But first, here's Golden Knights head coach Bruce Cassidy with Dave, Shane, Dan, and Gary.
And happy to be joined by the head coach of the Golden Knights here on SLGND, Bruce Cassidy. Bruce, it's been a little bit of a strange schedule for you guys lately. We're going to get to some off-ice things, but this time away in terms of limited games. Good thing, bad thing? Where do you fall on it this time of the year? Is it needed?
Well, I think it's situational. If you're running hot, you want to play every night, right? And you're healthy. And if you're not going as well as you'd like, maybe you need the practice time. If your room is dealing with some injuries or illness, sometimes having a little time off isn't bad, even though we just came out of a break. For us, the illness, I think, is through the room now, which is a good thing. Hopefully we're coming out of it and ready to go. Some of our players that have been out of the lineup are back skating, not necessarily all with the team, but in the mix, so that's a good thing. It always brings good energy to the group when you see guys getting closer. So for us, I don't mind the break right now. The way we're playing is okay. I thought we were playing better going into the break and then came out, beat Edmonton. I thought that was a lot of, Aiden's game. But we're starting to get to our game a little bit. Then Minnesota was a hiccup where we went backwards. So now we need the practice time. So for us, we're still sorting through stuff.
And in that, with the practice, what things are you pinpointing maybe you needed to work on here this week?
Our rush game against numbers have gone significantly backwards from where we were last year and the start of this year. So I look at that as, and it was a big strength of our team. So that to me is puck management first. We're giving teams easy chances. We saw that with some of the goals we've given up, Edmonton, Detroit. And then I find it's our high forward and our D not being as connected as they can be to deny teams getting the blue line as well. So that is a D. Will have a good, they'll have a good gap if they trust the forwards to reload and be in a good spot for them, right? Then they'll have confidence to stay up. And so that's the piece we got to tie together, which the puck management is not practicing anything. It's between your ears as a player, make a good decision, right? That's hard to practice. We can do drills where we force players to chip where there's nowhere to go, but in the game they have to make that decision. The structure piece, the high forward and the D gap, we can fix that as coaches. That's part of structure, and that's on us to make sure we teach it properly. So that's where the two are going to come together in the second half, and if we don't get better on that, then I think our team will be, average. If we get better at that, I think we'll be a much better team.
I just have a follow-up because when I watch the games, and maybe it's an old school me, you talk about the puck management. And guys, where do you balance the trying to make a play versus, sometimes I'm like, why do they try that? But they're skilled players. How do you balance that out with guys when they are trying to make a play versus maybe just make the simple play?
Well, every coach goes through it, and it's why some last a little longer in places because they find a way to get their message across that this is where we need to be less risk. Yeah. Some players you have to coach differently. Maybe a Mark Stone who has the ability to hold it the extra second and typically makes that play more time than he doesn't, than maybe another player we have to say, listen, that's not your game. Can't play that way. And then when they don't do it, it's okay. How do you hold them accountable? So that there's a lot that goes into it, just in a simple fact of you can do it, you can't. And that's maybe how you construct your lines as well. Maybe a guy, okay, he's making plays all the time. I got to put him on a forecheck line. A line that Will Carrier says, hey, dump it in my corner every time. So maybe that gets it out of his system. He's not trying to make a play. So there's variety of ways you can do it. At the end of the day, the player has to buy into it, right? The teams that turn the puck over all night, those are shootouts, right? And then in this league, eventually that it doesn't end well if you're that type of team, I think, in the long run.
You were able to get your team to play the way you wanted them to play last year, and you won the Stanley Cup. We asked you at the start of the year, How do you repeat? What's going to be hard? You said you didn't know because you'd never done it before. Now you're right in the thick of it. What has been more difficult for you based on the situation of that you're coaching a Stanley Cup champion team than a team last year when you were able to get their attention because they'd never won before?
Understanding that it's not a switch you can flip on and off, I think, is the challenge for our staff this year. Okay, we got to get to our game. Do we need to be at our game right away in October, November? But we got to build towards it. I think our guys really responded well to that sort of terminology last year. Build our game so that we're good in March and we're very good in April and we're excellent in May, right? And I think they really bought into it. This year, it's almost like, well, we're going to be that because we won last year. So that's the tough task right now. It's like it's not automatic. We're not automatically going to be that team because no 2 years are the same. So that's what we're going through now. And we've seen pockets where we get there, looks like we're going to get over the hump and we go backwards. So that's our biggest challenge right now. And some of that, as I said, is when I don't hate to use injuries as anything other than we've got other players coming in, but when the players are a little bit inferior to the ones you're losing, your record's going to reflect that at some point. So there's a little bit of that where I think our record could be better if we were healthier. But at the end of the day, we're healthy enough to me to be a challenge for first place. I still think it's within reach. That's my goal and has been all along. But we're going to have to giddy up and get to our game here pretty quick if that's something we realistically expect to get to. So we don't talk a lot, Gary, to the players about standings, but we do talk about what can we win. Well, we can win our division, right? We can win a ticket to the playoffs. So we do talk about those things because our guys like to win and they're competitive. So, but they don't want to hear about, well, Vancouver has 2 less games and they got this schedule and their analytics say this and that. They don't want to hear that. They just, they do want to sort of push here, and that's where this part of the season, I think, you have to push your team, and that's where it starts. For us coming up, and came out of the break and we started well. Had a hiccup the other night, a game we feel we could have won if we played better. Winnable game, but it's gone now, so now we got to focus on the next one.
Bruce, where does the thought of the amount of games you've played, condensed schedule earlier, and then knowing you've got 29 games to go, how to manage the rest for players? That again, as Dave mentioned before, you've not been in this exact situation before.
No, I honestly think we're past that now. They got their break, so they should have caught up a little bit of their rest. This break this week, honestly, we had three plans in place for how we're going to use this. 2 weeks ago it was going to be a mini training camp if we didn't get going here. We're going to go back to basics. Okay, we got to get out of the gate again. But we fixed some of our games, so it's like, okay, maybe we don't need to do that. We can take a day off in there, and then the illnesses come along. So which days? Then you're managing some injury guys coming back. So it got to be a little chopped up this week. But hopefully, guys got some time away from the rink because now it's on, right? Like after when we start Saturday, there's not a lot of breaks where you can take time away from the rink, right? You'll rest a little bit. So that's how we're planning it. As for defending champs, I think that's all in the rearview mirror now when it comes to plotting your season and your rest. We're in the home stretch here. We got to get going. We got to win our share of games if we expect to be good in the playoffs. That's the way I look at it. I don't think we can just flip on a switch on April 1st and say, okay, let's go. Because we're going to have some guys coming in the lineup that haven't played in a long time. I don't know exactly when those guys will return, but Theo's out, back and skating, and he's missed 3 months, so he's not going to just come out there day one and look like the old Theo. It's going to take some time, and the other guys when they get back, Jack and Will, and that it takes a little bit. So again, there's going to be some work involved there.
We just recently, Bruce, went through a heck of a stretch here in Vegas with the Super Bowl here, and I'm curious, someone like
Tay was in town,
and she was here. I heard
Did
that
a
was
nice
the rumor.
job. Yep,
Evidently, she dates a guy that plays for the Chiefs. So you watch the game. When you watch a game like that, do you watch it as a fan, or does part of your coaching brain, having led a team to a championship, get involved and you know what it takes to get there? How do you watch it?
No, I watch it as a fan, but
Okay.
having won last year, I watched probably a little closer. Okay, crunch time. Now you're in the fourth quarter, and they got a score, and Mahomes, how does he operate, right? And there's a reason why he's a winner, right? He elevates his game at the most crucial moments, and that seems to be the difference. And I think Brady did that for years, and a lot of the good teams do that. And I thought we did that last year, so that's a bit of a something to keep an eye on. Okay, guys, we got to elevate. Now that's one game, the Super Bowl, right? That's the difference between, it's not a 7-game series but he did it against Buffalo and he did it against Baltimore. So that this wasn't lucky, right? He went basically on the road and won 3 games against 3 of the best teams in the NFL, or the Chiefs did, but I look at Mahomes because he's the guy that kind of calls the shots there. I found it interesting, the Andy Reid-Kels kind of confrontation on the sideline. Some of that happens, right? And these two guys are tight and they've won together. So it just shows you the emotion that goes into, certain moments of playoffs, and how both of them have come out and said, listen, they probably don't even remember how it happened, to be honest with you. They're just in the heat of the moment of the battle, and no one's holding a grudge, I don't think. And I think it happens more than you think in a lot of sports.
How often does it happen on your bench?
Well, it happens predominantly with a guy like Marshy, right? He's probably the most emotionally charged guy on our bench. So there's times that we have to get a message to him, and he wants his opportunity to play a little, whatever the case. It's usually about playing time. It always is with players. And puck management, for that matter. We talked about that. There's a guy, okay? Yeah. Your question is, who gets the rope to make plays and who doesn't? Well, Marsh has always been a guy that can come through for you in the crunch, all right? But what are we going to do on February 11th when we need him to make a play behind there? You know what I mean? That's where the coaching, the relationship gets built and can get torn down or built up more if you handle it the right way. And so that's the part of the game I actually was like, okay, let's see what happens from this, because – I am a coach, and you deal with, emotional players.
Did you watch the Altcast last night?
No, what was that?
So they had the game was on TNT, so they had the regular crew, the broadcasters doing the game, and then on one of their other channels, True, I think it's called, they had Bissonnette.
Spit and Chicklets crew.
Yeah.
Oh, I read the story on that.
Yeah, okay. They had them watching, and then they had guests, and they didn't. Like, the play was on, and they weren't looking at the TV lots of times, and they'd turn and they'd look at it, and just like the Mannings, like when they do their Manning cast, they did one of those last night. If you didn't watch it, it's a bad question. Sorry.
No, I didn't. For which game was it?
The Pittsburgh game.
Florida-Pittsburgh.
No, yeah. That was the early one, right? Yeah. I was in the car. Henderson, Gary, 5:10 Cole.
Yep.
So that's you got to be on the road by 4. It's 45 minutes on the highway.
Yeah. So do you normally watch other hockey games with the sound on or the sound off?
Off.
I would encourage you to do that with our games.
I thought that might be the
specifically
answer,
the Vegas Golden Knights.
I would hit mute all the time.
Yeah. What can I tell you?
No, it's because the kids are asking questions, and because they're home from school, and so a lot of times it's off. If I'm by myself, it's on.
Do you find yourself doing the play-by-play for yourself?
No.
Okay.
No, but you know what? I did do. Did I ever tell you the story of my last game? My first year I coached in Jacksonville. I did the play-by-play the last game of the year.
You mentioned, I don't know if it was on the air, but I remember you mentioning
I switched. I let our player assistant coach a game because we were out or whatever our position was set, whatever it was. So I'd done color before, so I went up and did it with our radio guy, and it was Joe Zidlow. And I said, would anybody care if I did the play-by-play? I was a big Danny Gallivan fan back in the day, and Bob Cole. So he said, sure, go ahead. So I did it for half the game or a period, I forget.
And how did you do?
Well, I don't know, right? But I don't know. I don't mind.
Did you enjoy it?
I like it. I like to call the game because I know the
tape out there.
We should find that.
That's
tape
probably on tape.
But it's only radio, right? This isn't TV, so there's no.
Yeah, no, it's the.
But I'm sure I did one of those. And here comes gathering speed. I don't know if you remember that Danny Gallivan with Larry Robinson back in the day.
Yeah. So you just mentioned
can do it, Bruce. Believe me when I tell you.
You just mentioned that kids are asking questions. So what do they ask you, and what do they ask Julie?
Well, it's homework. For
I know.
me.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So
I do all the homework.
Oh, really?
She's a Harvard grad.
Yeah.
But somehow I end up doing all the homework, right? So it's like, what? Questions about, can I go here? Can I go there? Those go to mom.
Yeah.
It's like just.
But you can handle the Meadows math that they're.
I can do the
you.
Meadows math. I can do
Really?
the Meadows English, not Spanish. I can do French, but they're doing Spanish.
Wow.
History, I'm kind of like to read, so I'll handle all that as best as I can. So, but I got to say, they're a little bit starting to get past asking dad and mom. They're kind of like they go upstairs and they get on the phone and talk to their buddies.
Yeah.
But more about scheduling. Can I do this? Can I do that? And Shannon's now about to get her permit to drive, so she's trying to schedule that stuff.
No.
And
What?
Yeah.
So
I've taken her twice through the neighborhood, and that's different, right? Because you're just.
So I'll give you advice right now. I've gone through it 3 times. You hire a professional because there will be fights, especially with your daughter. just pay the money, 10 visits, They come, they teach them the routes, they teach them everything they'll need to pass the test. It's worked every time.
I think I'll get to that phase, but right now her first couple times we've just gone through our neighborhood, so it's really not busy.
Yeah.
But she almost drifted into a truck the other day that was parked because a car was coming the other way, right? So that was her first experience of a car coming. I said, listen, you got to trust that they're going to stay on their side of the lane. It's just how driving works, and you got to stay between the parked car and her, and then keep your eyes peeled for when you're in a neighborhood, right? Dogs or kids could run out anyway. So she's so far so good, but you're right. I have every intention of once it gets a little more serious, it's okay. Let's go on to the, like I'll teach him how to hold a golf club and swing it, but now want to start hitting draws and fades, you got to go to the pros, right?
You mentioned you're a history buff, Bruce. What are you reading these days?
I'm reading a John Irving book. It's very long. I don't know. Do you read John Irving at all?
I don't.
He's kind of a political, opinionated guy. He's getting older now. I think this might be his last book. A lot of his books revolve around wrestling. I think he was a big wrestling fan, probably wrestled. A lot to do with Austria and Germany for some reason. I don't know if his parents spent time over there. And usually topical subjects. Like what was his Cider House Rules, I think was probably his most famous one. Was turned into a World According to Garp. So there were some good movies.
I've read I read his earlier stuff, his more fictional stuff, but like The World According to Garp and Cider House Rules. But what's the book you're called?
I think it's called The Last Chairlift. It's on my iPad, so you never see the title. So, and it's skiing too. He's big into, and it's a story about a boy that never meets his father, and he's always talking. There's all kinds of different sort of what am I looking for? Topics on sexuality and this and that, and he's always been one of those guys that's not afraid to bump up against that stuff and talk about whatever's current. I think, he even went to Canada during the war, and he was against
Vietnam.
Yeah, he was probably a draft dodger maybe, or something to that
they call
effect,
them,
or whatever they were called. So
conscientious objector.
Yeah, and he's pretty open about it. And I find his stuff interesting. It can get long-winded at times if that's not your thing, but A Prayer for Owen Meany was fantastic.
Really good book. I read
fantastic.
that as well,
They made a great movie. I forget what the movie was called. But anyway, that's and I just read The Killer. Was it the Osage?
The Killers of the
Flower Moon, right?
Yeah,
so that was a very good book.
Shane and I are wives, and Dave's our wives are in the same book club. So it's been on it's been in the house recently for all three.
Well,
of us.
I highly recommend it. It's very informative. Again, being a Canadian, oblivious to some of the stuff that happened in the 50s and 20s and 30s in the U.S. and how the FBI started and all. It was, like I said, it was a good story, but also you learn a little. I guess I like to read books where I learn something when I put the book down. I like to be entertained, but I like to learn something.
Some guys do. Sorry, Danny, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, what is the benefit of reading? When do you find time to read?
Well, some people will watch movies. I'm more of the book guy than the movie. So on the plane in the summer. Lots of free time on the beach in the summer. At night is a little easier here because a lot of games are over at 7:00, right? So if there's no Western games and you're going to bed, you want to read for a bit, you can if you're not watching hockey. Whereas back east, it seemed like there was, they wouldn't end till 10, and then it's time to go to bed. So
yeah.
Some people have they'll read a fiction book, first fiction book, and then the next book is like. A business book or a history
or coaching
book or
for me. Like,
yeah.
I agree. I usually had a pattern where I want to be entertained, so I'm going to read a book that I can get through, and then it's like maybe a history, something I'm going to learn, and then it'd be okay. Pat Riley put out a book, or Bill Belichick.
You have a 3-style cycle.
Well, maybe 4 or 5, whatever. Then, but I didn't always want to crank. I would never read 6 sports books in a row because I'd sort of forget that. So I like to mix it up. Favorite author maybe would be one eventually, like when Dennis Lehane. I don't know if you ever. He's a
Mr.
Massachusetts
Grimmer,
guy.
all those
But those are
books,
easy reads, right? They're fiction, good stories. And you can get through them fairly quickly. So that he's usually in the mix if he comes out with one.
I was talking with Daniil Miramanov about some of the books that he's read, and he has a success checklist from some of the different sports psychology books, mindset type books. Do you find that any of those things that you pick up, you express to your players or to your fellow coaches?
Good question. Some of it I do. I used to read a lot more of them. Now that you have more life experiences, you can draw on some of that more than a book. Like I would never take a page out of a book, highlight it, and then go repeat it. Like that's someone else's phrase or that's someone else's way of doing things. But what can I take from that, the messaging in that maybe? And it's like, okay, how does that apply to Bruce Cassidy's style of coaching?
Yeah.
And so that's what I would take from those.
You a couple of shows we were talking about, Bruce. So have you heard about there's a new 10-part series on the Patriots called The Dynasty.
Oh boy.
Coming out on Apple TV. But it's like all behind the scenes, the whole thing for 20 years. I think it comes out tomorrow. I'll text you a reminder to yourself.
Dave texts himself, so he can text you as well. Put you in a group chat.
Put us all on it.
Yeah, just a group text.
It's just I'm going to defend Dave on this one. It's just a modern way of
It's his
taking
OCD.
notes. No,
Yes. No, it's not.
when
I work with him.
I put in reminders
My
for
notes for the
myself
game.
in my phone.
Yeah,
Yep.
there's an app for that, but you can text yourself.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then the other one we were talking is on Netflix, right? The
Greatest Night at Pop.
The making of the We Are the World song. And
I was
video.
scrolling through that over
It's
the break,
really good.
looking for a movie, Julie and I, and I did stop on. I thought it might be interesting, but we ended up watching, I think it was Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
2 nights. Took me 2 nights
Yeah,
because
it's a
that's
long
a
one.
3-hour job. But again, some history there, obviously.
Yeah.
That's what it
Yeah.
all
Great
of it, but
actor.
Yes.
Peaky Blinders.
So okay, there you go. I'm looking
Yeah.
for. I haven't caught up on the 6th season, so I got to get that done. But I got to do that on my own time because Julie didn't watch the first 5, so I need that. And I'm not sure she'd want to just pick up and she wouldn't get because it's fairly violent, right?
Yeah.
And there's some story there, but I got to finish that. But he is great. Cillian, is that how you say it? Murphy?
Yes.
Yeah, he does a good job.
Did you see the U2 show at the Sphere?
I saw it in December.
Yeah. What'd you think?
Loved it. I've been a U2 fan forever. More Pearl Jam now, but still always followed them. Saw them when I was playing hockey in Switzerland. I drove 2 hours to Basel, Switzerland. That was the big, I think it's Europa tour with the big McDonald's. Remember they had that big thing on the stage? Yeah. Played with Lou Reed.
Shane, you saw him in Europe too, didn't you?
Some in France, Paris.
It was a good show. But anyway, back to the Sphere. Great venue. Like the way they
sound was incredible.
To try to describe it to people, like I send them some videos on the background, right? And it's like you just got to go. You got to see it. I thought it was a great show. I thought the Edge was on top of his game. First star. Bono was great. The new drummer did a good job.
Yeah. That's another great documentary, too. It's called A Sort of Homecoming. David Letterman goes over to Dublin last year and sat down with Bono and the Edge and talked about their whole career. It was, and kind of as a precursor to this Sphere show, they did a private show, a little bit of like a jazz piece to it. It was phenomenal. So add that to your list if you could.
I will. I
Great.
I
He's
thought
kind of busy with coaching.
Oh,
You're
come
on a long
on.
list.
I got stuff to do. I didn't love the set list as much as maybe, but I think with a band like U2, like everybody's going to walk out of there with a different opinion, right? Like your favorite might be more recent versus. I like some of their original stuff more, like from Boy and
I like
what is
Boy
it,
and
War.
War.
So and they only played a couple, I think, and one was an acoustic. Maybe Sunday, Bloody Sunday was acoustic, and I want the drums, right, and the whole. But anyway. Still enough good songs in it, right? That you're not going to leave disappointed. It's just there's so many to pick from.
I kind of felt the same. Like there's certain artists that probably have earned the right to play whatever they want. Otherwise, they'd be up there a week.
I saw David Bowie one time, and he played. It was the Glass Spider tour, and the album sucked. And he played the whole album, and then he was like, "Well, I guess I can't get away with playing one of the old ones." And he played Rebel Rebel. It was the only one he played. I was like, I want it was $19, but that tells you how long
you
ago
want
it was.
$17.50 back. You'll pay
$3
$1.50 for Rebel. But
3 of us are excited to see Springsteen. One of us is not. What about you?
It's March, right?
Yeah,
March 22nd. Yeah.
Friday.
I'm in the middle, so I guess I'm in the middle. I saw Springsteen once in D.C.
I saw him once.
Good show.
That's enough.
I would go again, but
crazy.
if I miss it, I'm not. The Stones in May. That's the one we.
Oh yeah.
That's the one I'd be more excited about.
I think it's Billy Joel and Sting in November at Allegiant. Billy Joel's new song, played it at the Grammys, played it at MSG. Thumbs up from Dan.
So Cole and Shannon jump in the car with you. You're driving to practice. Well, who's in charge of the tunes?
Well, I am because they're on their iPhone the whole way.
No kidding, eh?
So that's easy now. It's
No,
easy.
my daughter wants to sit up front and wants to.
She wants to. Okay.
She's a little young. Well, she's the same age as Cole, I think. So she still wants to yak, and but I want to play something, and she's like,
Did you say radio? It's funny. There's kids on mine drive now. Every time I get in my vehicle, it's on aux because they plug their phones in for their music.
Yeah.
And I'll hit my country station, and next thing my eardrums are blowing out because they don't turn down the volume. But yeah, they don't listen to the radio. It's all
No, and what I do have is a playlist that I seem to play a lot in my phone that's translated to the car. So as soon as I get in, so that's when Shannon will speak up every once in a while. Put Taylor Swift's because I have she's one of the artists with a bunch of songs, so she likes that. That takes us to Henderson. I don't mind. Like I said, I like Taylor Swift. I'm proud to say it. Not at all.
She's done okay for herself.
Yeah, she's done well. So,
Run, so.
not every song, but I like her music for the
like
most
her
part.
music
I
too,
like the way she's managed her career. And
Best thing that happened was whoever the guy was that sold all her original stuff, right? Then she re-recorded
Scooter Braun?
everything.
Yeah.
And she was doing okay before that, but what a
Taylor's
what a-
version,
what a
right?
move.
That's what she called
talented.
it. When
Yeah.
she
What
did
a
everything
move.
over.
isn't there another one coming out soon, or is it already there? Another one dropped? One of those remakes, or
I think she announced that she's got a new record coming, right?
so
At
a
the
new
Grammys,
record,
yeah.
but not one of the older ones redoing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
How about that, eh? Walking up and grabbing a Grammy and saying, "By the way, I got another one." I guess that's like you standing up on the stage saying, "Let's do it again."
Why not?
Yeah.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
And a lot of those Kansas City Chiefs were already talking about a three-peat.
Good for them. They got the team to still do it, right? I'm not as dialed into the football team, who's a free agent, who's not, but I think they're returning key pieces. They're still young.
They got Mahomes.
They got the
We
quarterback.
got him. He's
The Red Blacks just signed a good quarterback, Bruce.
Oh, yeah?
God.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I'm surprised my nephew hasn't texted me. Who is it?
Drew Brown.
Drew
He was
Brown,
with the
all
Blue Bombers. He was their number 2.
Okay,
Oh,
so,
wow.
the,
Are
so
they still
Ottawa could
kicking
be
it?
celebrating next
still
year.
kicking it over the guy's shed for the Roos point.
Bruce and I are CFL
Listen,
fans.
I used
so-
to scramble for those. They'd kick the extra point or a field goal and into the stands in the I think it was the west end zone, and you'd pay $3 or $2 to go, and you'd fight for the football. So I'm 12 or 13, so I got the crap kicked out of me by the 16 and 17-year-old. So I never got a ball. I had to pay for it after and buy it from the neighbor.
Lansdowne
My
Park.
own neighbor grabbing it from me, kind of shoving me away. But it was a J5V, which
Yeah.
is a CFL ball, and you
That's
had to
right.
have one of those.
Jake
But-
Goddard.
so I saved up. I had a paper route for a long time, and I'd buy it instead of getting the freebie from.
The Ottawa Citizen, or what was the?
It was the Journal.
the
At
Journal,
first.
yeah.
And one day I would go to deliver the Journal, and they just stopped.
Yeah.
Like they stopped. It
Famous-
wasn't like they give you in a month we're stopping the paper. It's like that day you're not. There's no papers here. Why? Because we've ceased operations.
There
So
were two
it
rich
was off to the
families in
Citizen.
Canada that owned newspapers, and they both owned one in Ottawa and one in Winnipeg. So they got together one day and said, "Okay, you can have Ottawa, and we'll take Winnipeg." So they shut down one paper in Ottawa and shut down one paper in Winnipeg. So like it was it was totally illegal. It was a monopoly. So it's called the Kent Commission. Too much Canadian history for you, but that's
Lighten
what
your
happened.
load, though.
So
on
that's
the-
a
on
book
the
I
paper
could
route.
read if that was worked into the sort of the storyline of whatever else
Yeah.
was going on. Because I ended up getting the paper out right away for the Citizen, which
Yeah.
took over Ottawa. So there happened to be a girl was giving it up, and it was. I delivered to 2 senior citizens' homes, and there were 5 floors, so it was a piece of cake. You bomb through that. You know, when you're a kid, you're doing the streets right on your bike, and it takes forever. Up and down 5 floors to the other building, done. And it was easy to collect,
How many
right? Back then,
papers?
you had to collect. You had to knock on the door and collect. Well, they're senior citizens; they're not going
Yeah.
anywhere, so it was easy to, you never had to chase them down.
Perfect for Halloween.
I had 47 papers on my route.
Oh, I would have had 50 in each building.
Oh, so that
It was a
that's,
moneymaker for
That's
me.
good money.
It was 6 blocks away, so I had to ride my bike there. That was the toughest part of it. But once I was there, it was a piece of cake.
So how long then you were done for that was it? Done for the day?
Well, it was the Journal was switched to a morning, I think, for a while. So, but mine was always after school. So yeah, I'd go up after school. Did it for a while. I didn't come from much. So if I wanted to buy a bike or I got my usual stuff for Christmas, but after that I was on my own. So it was a way to make. And I thought it was easy money.
Did you have the punch for
Yeah,
collecting?
For collecting,
Yeah,
yeah. You
yeah.
flip the card and you rip the stub off and
Yeah.
you give it to them. And
So
$1.70, so you always had to have 30 cents change because some people were the great tippers, right? They give you the $2, it's a 30 cents.
yeah.
Some gave you the nickel. Most just wanted their.
I can remember
30 cents.
Most wanted their change.
And I can remember at Christmas,
Keep the change.
You'd go to the door and you'd do your collecting, and same thing. It was $1.70 or whatever. And at Christmas, you'd expect that blue $5 bill to come out, and there'd be no change. But there was some cheapos.
That's a
on
Canadian $5 for everybody. The
Yeah,
blue.
the 10 is just so
Most
you
of the
know
people
out
that
there.
hear this, it's colored money in Canada.
Yeah, the 10 is purple. The dollar bill was green, like your
yeah,
typical
green.
American dollar. You had the kind of orangey 2, right? Or what
Yeah,
color would that
$2
be?
bill.
Kind of
Yeah,
reddish
two-
orange.
Reddish orange, yeah.
The 20, I don't see a lot of 20s in
Green.
my day. What was
Green.
it? Green, yeah. there
Red
you
was
go.
50.
50. And a brownie for the hundo.
Yeah.
In America, we just make it easy, make it all one.
It's not easy, though. When you're loaded at the bar, you can just look at the colors. You know what you have to do.
That's the reason right there.
Exactly.
Talk about a nostalgia podcast. Newspaper, radio, and counting your change.
Just Venmo.
There's a lot of older fellas in Canada that like their pops, so they needed colored money. Dan, give them a break. Hard-working guys.
Sure.
Bruce, thanks for this, and I'm sure this is a great way for you to spend your time between games.
Enjoyed it. Thanks for
Thanks,
having
Bruce.
me.
Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Bruce.
it.
That was Bruce Cassidy on Thursday in Studio 31. Next up, a reaction to Bruce's comments and a look ahead at the playoff push for the VGK, including potential moves ahead of the NHL's trade deadline on March 8th. Let's go back to Dave.
Great to have Bruce Cassidy with us on SLG&D. His team is, you look at it right now, guys, they're at this hour, 10 behind Vancouver in the Pacific. They are 5 up on Edmonton. Neither of those teams have done a lot of losing lately. So how do you look at where they're at right now, Shane, inside now, the final 29 games to go?
Well, it's crucial, right? This is the final stretch to playoffs. This is a team that's competitive, wants to win, the Golden Knights, and I think their game. It's kind of. I don't think there's been a lot of consistency yet to the way they need to play, to their game, as Bruce Cassidy calls it. Have they gotten to their game for long enough periods for a long enough stretch? I don't think so. I think they've gotten by at certain times. They've, up and down. There's some key injuries, but, hopefully, Shea Theodore back on the ice. I don't think it's immediate, but in the foreseeable future. But he's going to need some time to get back. So it's the group they have. I think they have a good, the good enough group right now, but it's about playing their style. When you think of the Golden Knights, you guys, we've watched them long enough. We know what their game looks like. The fans know what it looks like when they're at the top. It starts in the defensive zone, the way they defend. And when I talk about the way they defend, I think it starts in the neutral zone through to their own end and playing the right way. So this is very important. I think there's time to rest to get their game back now. But once you come out of it, starting here on Saturday, it's go time.
I have a question for you. March 8th is the trade deadline. You're in that room right now. Are you looking around knowing that Kelly McCrimmon and George McPhee and Bill Foley, they want to win the Stanley Cup this year?
Yep.
Are you comfortable, or are you looking around thinking, we're right? Like they probably have to look in the mirror and evaluate: are we good enough to win the Stanley Cup as we are? Because if we're not, if they believe that maybe they're not, they have to be prepared for change.
So I'll go back and I'll tell you, guys who've been around the league, and these guys know. So you're in that room. There's two trains of thought. They're a close group, right? If they're not successful to then, they know change has come.
Yep.
And then the other thing is you want to win again. So there's two forms of motivation. One, you want to keep your group together. If you don't play well, there's going to be change, and it's usually not for the better. Whereas if you play well, you keep this group, you're going to be adding, hopefully, give the GMs, give the organization a reason for them to add to an already good club. And then that's the trick of them not messing up the chemistry. You got to make the right moves where you don't mess up that chemistry. I think as a group, they believe they have all they need in there, because they did it last year with the majority of this group. I really, truly believe that. But there's an understanding as guys who've been around that, all right, we've got to get this together, or else they're going to figure it out for us. Let's figure it out ourselves. And they're confident and believe they have the team that it takes. Well, now let's show it.
Yeah, it's interesting, like what you just said about the chemistry. So Barbashev, Bluger, and Quick, if I'm correct. If I'm not, you know what I mean? So Quick becomes a home run in the sense that the guys loved him. He had experience. And you talk to Paul Cotter, who didn't get to play in the playoffs. He said, Jonathan led us. He kept us together and kept us positive, and kept us happy. Barbashev is a home run. And Bluger had a big role to play in the series against Edmonton when they threw him in there. So it is Kelly McCrimmon doesn't share his thoughts with anyone. I will be fascinated to see what happens around here.
So that's the reward right there, right? So if they play well, they understand you're adding without subtracting much.
You look at it objectively, what do they need? If they're going to add.
Well, they need to get healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the problem, right? You'd love to see them healthy so you can evaluate it all. So that's going to play a factor too. They're gonna have to look at where their health is that time. Is there guys that maybe are going to be out till playoffs? Now you've got to add then because they want to come in strong, and that was part of it last year. They had the flexibility with Mark Stone, knowing you wouldn't have him, or would they get him back in playoffs? So that allows them to make more moves. That's why we get to just talk about it.
Yeah.
This is heavier on Kelly McCrimmon and George McPhee.
Yeah, you think about the boost that for just a generic team gets from acquiring a player at a deadline. All right, we got a new guy. For the Golden Knights, that has been the track record. They have added at the deadline, but you're thinking about the injured players. Shea Theodore, Jack Eichel are the two biggest impact players. It's almost like making a trade to get two big-time players, puck-moving defensemen with a lot of offensive and a top-line center. Yeah. We don't know exactly when they'll return, but you get some kind of a boost with those guys returning, not to mention some of the others who have been out, like Carrier and Ben Hutton.
You can't diminish Will Carrier and his importance.
It's a bunch of guys, and obviously there's only 18 skaters that are going to be in a lineup on a given night.
I'll answer the question.
Yeah.
They need to add everywhere. They haven't been healthy at goalie. They need insurance there. The blue line hasn't been, and maybe Shea comes back and all of a sudden it's better. But I don't think it's not operating at the same efficiency as it was last year. And I think I look at when they're healthy, I still think that they're a scorer light. So I would say you need a little bit in all three areas.
And I don't want to forget Pavel Dorofeev because he's only 23. He was the guy who sat a lot, has been unavailable since the hit from Trouba back in the New York Rangers game in New York. And again, that's just one player we don't want to leave out. The trouble has been that there has been a long list. It's shorter than it was a few weeks ago, but it's still, you're looking at these guys coming back, and you can't play all of them every game.
Dave always wants to add.
Well, I just think, I think for this group, and to Gary's point, if I was going to prioritize it, I think they need someone to help score up front. Yeah. They've tried a lot of different combinations, but I think they need to add and they're not alone. They need to add somebody that can score.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with their back end if they get healthy.
I think they've got a lot of defensemen.
Caden Korzak, who's back down, what he's shown.
They haven't been healthy, so it's unfair for me. Perhaps, but I look at it and I wonder. So.
And the goaltending thing makes sense.
That makes sense.
Just given what they needed last year, all the goaltenders, it was this time of year.
Right?
Yeah, 4 wins in a row with 4 different goalies. Yeah. Not that you need to do that every year. It never happened before, but you just never know how things are going to unfold. But that's the area where, there's only 2 goaltenders on a roster as opposed to, let's say, 12, 13 forwards, 7, 8 defensemen. That's, you just wonder what's going to happen in that department, given that Aiden Hill has missed significant time this year, missed significant time last year. It's just one of those things that you can't help but ignore.
And that's why it's important coming out of here. There's some guys that are valuable to this team and have showed the way they can play that have another gear.
Yep.
There are some key guys that can play better.
So we're in the room. There is no worry or panic in there.
No.
I think that I've heard the phrase "we'll be okay" a number of times, and maybe they know best. Maybe that's we've been banged up, but when we get it all back together, we're going to be able to get going. And they have not played. It's really simple, right? They have not been as clean in the neutral zone and with their puck decisions as they were in the playoffs. They got to that place where you could count in a series how many times they turned it over in the neutral zone.
Yeah.
Now, that's not the way it is right now. Right now, it's every night. There's a bunch of that.
Bruce Cassidy earlier in the podcast talked about that switch, and it's not as simple as just turning it on, turning it off. You know that this team can step up because they have in big games. Look at that Edmonton game right out of the break. That was just a terrific game, felt like a playoff game. But then against Minnesota, that was a winnable game. It was there for the taking, and Bruce Cassidy talked about it in the interview a little bit. So you don't want to get into that spot where you can just say, okay, that wasn't a good game, we'll flip it on for the next one. That doesn't always work.
He doesn't think they're just going to be fine.
Yeah. Well, that's there you go.
That's his job to worry about it,
yeah,
right?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
You mentioned Trouba.
Who did?
You did.
I think
You
I
me-
mentioned him.
The
when
Dorf.
he,
Sorry.
When
okay.
he hit
yeah, but I want to.
Dorofeev.
Okay.
Yeah.
When they play them next year, does he have to pay for that? Does he have to answer for that? The hit on Dorofeev?
Oh, you're going to put me in this whole conversation with
Oh,
the
boy.
Riley and Greg and everything going on around the league?
Yeah, you're the other one that played.
I would think so, but who's going to, that's on them. I would, if going back to when I played, and it's tough because the game has evolved.
Yeah.
The players have certainly evolved. John Tortorella had some great comments late. Was that today or yesterday?
Called it a dumb league.
Well, and I only meant in that. And he just sent. It's a different mentality for these young guys coming. That where I came in, and I've talked about it before about earning respect. I was scared to go in the training room. Like I didn't go for a massage for 2 years. Back to the team massage because you had to earn your right to go back there, and it was kind of you earn that respect from the veterans. You earned your way to being a pro, and it's different. It's not only in hockey. It's different society right now about the youth, and they want to come out, and all of a sudden, so should he be? I would say yes. It's just like Morgan Riley was a bad, but again, it's a mentality. Why would you go in a crowd? Our time, your gloves would be off, and you'd go in.
Yeah.
Well,
I felt. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I thought two things. 15 years ago, just to pick a time frame. A, Greg would not have done that.
No, or if he did, he knew that he would have been turned around ready for the answer.
Right. B, there would have been a price to pay.
Yes.
And that's what.
And I didn't have a problem with any of it. Like he's showing a little bit of like Matthew Barnaby in the day would do something like that, but he would expect, turn around, and be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt bad for Morgan Riley. I really like him. He's not that guy. And if he was that guy, he would have known. I can't cross-check him because if I do, I might get suspended. I'm going to punch him in the face. And if he had done that, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah.
Well, times have changed.
Times have changed. The game's changed.
Evidently.
and-
Springsteen's still coming here.
Yes,
Times haven't changed that
thank
much.
heaven.
Woo,
See you
yeah.
at the show. Shane will see you there.
Yeah. By the way, we were talking about movies. Have you guys seen The Iron Claw? I watched it last night.
No.
About the Von Erich.
Oh,
No, but I
Baron
know-
Von Erich, yeah.
Yeah.
This is really
I know
interesting.
the whole story.
You do know the whole story.
Oh,
yeah. Ric Flair
one-
has
one kid still alive.
Yes, it's crazy.
So.
Well, you don't give it away to the people who haven't
Yeah,
seen
I'm
it.
going to watch it now.
So
thanks to
it's
Shane.
about the famous wrestling family.
Yes.
Terry Von Erich was the guy with the great hair, and they're from Texas, aren't they?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the dad was the original
Fritz.
The
Yeah.
Iron Claw,
Yeah.
and then he was a little bit hard. But anyways, it's a great show. It was really
So
well
it's a quick funny aside. When I was, it seems like when you're a kid, you kind of watch wrestling.
Yeah.
At least I did. So in Rhode Island, they had the WWF at the time.
Yeah.
Was on Saturday mornings at 11. And another channel, Channel 25, had World Class Championship Wrestling, which was the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. I always watched that instead of the WWF.
I was the other way around.
I thought they were so far ahead of their time. Music entries going to the ring,
Yeah.
great
We had
camera angles.
We had the AWA,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
which is out of Minnesota, the Vern Gagne circuit. So it was that stuff was great.
So I remember vividly when David Von Erich died.
Really.
So
in Japan.
yeah, so this movie came out fairly recent. What's it on now? What did you?
It's on out. It's still just out.
Okay,
yeah.
so I was telling my wife this. I said we have to watch this movie. She has zero interest in it.
My wife watched it last
But
night with me. She liked it.
I proceeded to tell her basically the whole story. This guy dies. Blah, 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 blah.
we had no idea about
right?
the whole story.
And she says to me, "You can't remember a damn thing I tell you, but you can tell me how Kerry Von Erich
and
died."
that is your talent. You are for any sports history.
Oh, yeah.
You can recall.
So I said, I remember the important things. And that didn't go over well.
That was the coach.
It was great. Yeah, he was like, you are what a moron.
Dave is a smart with history, common sense, a fail.
Yeah, just out to lunch in the common sense. Jeez, obviously.
That's why you guys are such a good pair.
Oh, my gosh. Well, that's good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed
Anyways.
it. So that'll do it. We'll end it on the Von Erichs note. And watch that. Shane says it's good. He gives it a 5-star review.
All right.
And we thank Bruce Cassidy for joining us as
Terrific.
well. And we'll talk to you next time on SLGND.
Before we leave you today on SLGND, we acknowledge a major milestone for Knights defenseman Alex Pietrangelo, who played his 1,000th NHL game on Monday against the Minnesota Wild. While Alex's humility shines through in his own response to the achievement, those around him were quick to celebrate the milestone for the two-time Stanley Cup champion. Here's Alex Pietrangelo, along with Bruce Cassidy, Chandler Stevenson, and Alec Martinez on the 1,000 game mark for the Knights Blue Liner.
It's a good opportunity to kind of take a step back, and we get caught up in our job too, right? And like I said, so see the pictures of my family and my kids with the Stanley Cup and everything that's happened in my career, and then looking back at my draft year pictures, all that stuff. It's pretty crazy how fast time goes.
What comes to mind when you see those draft day pictures and those early headshots?
Well, I looked a lot fresher before I had 4 kids. Love my kids to death, but it's like I said, time goes by fast, and I had some of my old teammates here that were there when I first started, and you don't get to this spot without a lot of good people along the way. And I've said I love what I do, but I love the people, and you meet a lot of really good people along the way, and I don't think you play long in this career without those friendships.
I know it's tough to talk about yourselves. You guys don't like to do that. You like to talk about the team. But can you describe what the 1,000 game milestone means to a hockey player? Like if you look back at when you were young and what that 1,000 game milestone meant.
I think obviously the big one is winning the Stanley Cup, right? That's a big milestone. You want to achieve that. But I think when you get further in your career, there's not many individual milestones that you really get to, and this is obviously a big one. And I keep getting reminded not that many people have done it in the history of the NHL. So I think I'm really trying to enjoy it for what it is. And like I said, I don't think I get to where I am without, one, my wife and my kids, right? They kind of keep me going, and all the teammates and everybody that I've crossed paths with throughout the years.
Today is Alex Pietrangelo's 1,000th NHL regular season game. If someone were to meet you, ask you about Alex Pietrangelo, didn't know anything about him, what would you tell that person about Alex?
Complete hockey player, true professional, great teammate. That's what he is. And he's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion because of that. He had obviously huge input in both cups, the one he won in St. Louis and obviously the one here. So can't say enough good things about Petro. He's great for the room. Great practice player too. He drives up the intensity level of it. So we're fortunate to have him.
Let's talk about what's happening today. A milestone for one of your teammates, Alex Pietrangelo, 1,000 games. What do you think that number means in this sport? There aren't that many players who've reached 1,000 games played.
Yeah, I think that's a goal in itself for a lot of guys, to play 1,000 games. I know just kind of seeing him today just feels a little bit more giddy almost, you could say. Because, it is, so special to, get the presentation before the game with your family there. And, they've been through it for forever, so for your whole journey. So I think that's special for them as well, and to have them there. And I think that obviously for myself too, it's now a goal of mine. At first you just want to play in the NHL, and you want to play in the playoffs, and you want to win a Stanley Cup and that. But I think that would be something that's really special as well, as to play 1,000 games, because like you said, there's only a select few that have done it, and I just think that would be something that would be so special.
What qualities of Alex Pietrangelo do you think rub off on his teammates?
I think just his energy. He's so easygoing. Every day he's at the rink, he's having fun. He just, I think, loves being around the guys and being a hockey player, and what all comes with that. So he's been outstanding since he got here, and You can see why he's played 1,000 games, and I think he can play, another few more.
What comes to mind when you think of players who reach the 1,000 game mark in their career as we look ahead to Monday for Alex Pietrangelo?
A lot of different things. Obviously, talent, dedication, durability, playing the game the right way. I can basically just describe Petro. There's obviously much more than that, but I mean, it's a really incredible accomplishment. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. Obviously, you have the things behind the scenes and family support, and everyone who knows Petro knows that he has that, in spades, and the stuff that he does off the ice to take care of himself, and the things that he does to stay healthy, or at least. Obviously, no one's never going to get hurt unless you're Phil Kessel, but to help mitigate that risk, and then on the ice stuff. I mean, I say it time and time again. I mean, the guy's an absolute horse. He's a number one D-man for a reason. He's competitive in all areas of the rink. I mean, sometimes I sit there just as his partner on the ice with him and thinking how the hell did he just win that battle? But he does. He's a competitor. He's committed to all areas of the ice. He's obviously gifted offensively, and the defensive part of it obviously speaks for itself.
You mentioned him being a horse. The kind of minutes that he plays, how much more impressive does that make this kind of milestone?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just he plays all situations. I mean, obviously you can argue that penalty kill is maybe physically more taxing than power play would be, but I mean, he's still out there. He's getting up and down the ice. He's making the breakouts all the time. I mean, the guy, we call him Iron Lung. I think I've legitimately heard him say, "I'm tired," once, maybe. But yeah, and then on top of special teams, he plays against the top lines, and he has pretty much his entire career. So. Yeah, that's a really good point by you. It's not just a lot of minutes, it's hard minutes too.
That was some of the reaction around the room for Alex Pietrangelo's 1,000th NHL game. For more on Game 1,000 for Alex, check out this week's episode of VGK Today. And for full interviews, highlights, and more podcasts, visit soundcloud.com/Vegas Golden Knights and follow at VGK Radio Network on X, formerly known as Twitter. We'll see you next time on SLGND, presented by Allegiant.